Hello folks, it's the PCS again. Welcome to another one of my videos. This is part 3 of the series looking at the buses of KHCT, in other words Kingston upon Hull City Transport. In part 1 we looked at my own photographs which were taken between the 1980s and the early 2000s. In part 2 we looked at some slides that I'd acquired that showed the late council era in around 1993. And in this one, part 3, we're going to look at the Cleveland Transit era, so around 1994. Now in December 1993, as we said in parts 1 and 2, Hull City Council sold KHCT to a consortium of its own employees who owned 49% and Cleveland Transit who owned 51%. As the majority shareholder, Cleveland Transit could call the shots when it came to livery, etc., and they chose to bring in a version of their livery. So this is Cleveland Transit livery seen on a rather nice refurbished Leland fleet line in Stockton-on-Tees. Fleet number 121, registration YVN521T. As you can see, it was green and white with a yellow band. You can see the proportions of it there. And this was a Hull version of it with a nice bright blue replacing the green. We saw this photo in part 1. It's one of my photos of 354 NAT 354M, which was the only native Atlantean in Hull to be painted in the new livery. There were 4 others that were transferred down from Cleveland that carried it, but this was the only one that had been new to KHCT to carry the livery, and in my opinion rather nice it looked as well. A lot of enthusiasts didn't really like the new colours, but then again probably in 1972 when the streamlined livery was abolished and the Hull azure and white linear livery was brought in, enthusiasts probably didn't like that either, so you know, change always is controversial, but as I say, in my opinion it looks really good. As we said in the previous 2 parts, a bus war had broken out in Hull in 1992 and 1993. It had left all operators quite severely damaged financially, but KHCT especially so. The fleet became very scruffy, the money wasn't there for the fleet upkeep. So the new owners needed to do something to smarten up the fleet and to project a smarter new image, and part of that was the new livery. So obviously they couldn't get all the buses through the paint shop at the same time, so what they did was they used up the stocks of the old Hull Azure paint, and they gave a lot of buses lower deck repaints. Most of the pictures we're going to look at in this one are slides by Jeff Jones. I've bought them with the copyright, but it did say if you can mention Jeff Jones when you use them, and I'm happy to do so. Unfortunately, slide printers that I use have once again printed them all backwards, so I've had to photograph them on my phone, reverse them and then print them out, which is why they're not quite 100%. But this is one of the buses that had a lower deck repaint. This is 807, one of the Scania double-deckers with East Lancashire bodywork. So yeah, this was registration number G807LAG. It was new to KHCT in December of 1989. It survived into the Stagecoach era. Stagecoach bought Cleveland Transit in November 1994 and bought out as well the KHCT employees' share of KHCT. So it became a Stagecoach subsidiary in November 1994. And this bus passed the Stagecoach. It lasted with them until April 1999, when it was sold to the dealers Houston Ram near Rochdale. They had an operating division called the Coachmasters, and some of the Hull Scanias went into that. This one didn't. It was sold on again by Houston Ram in a dealer capacity. It went off up to southern Scotland for a bit, up to Lanarkshire, and it eventually went back down to Essex, and it ended up in TGM's Colchester fleet, and it went to one of the Carlton dealers in 2010 eventually, and that was its last recorded movement. It's seen here in Hull bus station on the 5 to Orchard Park Tesco. It's just running on that. It's just about to go out on another run by the look of it. And again, it's had a lower saloon repaint. You can see the sort of painting of the upper works doesn't look particularly good, but the lower saloon's been repainted in the old Hull Azure colour. It's had a new logo put on it, the Transit era KHCT logo, and the Transit style fleet numbers, white fleet numbers, 1 on each side. So as we said, most of the photos in this one are from the Transit era, so that's between December 1993 and November 1994. Now, as well as repainting lower saloons in the old colour, as we've just seen with 807, they obviously tried to get as many buses as they could do through the paint shop into the new livery. You can see 808 there, sister vehicle G808LAG. And next to it is 108B108 UAT, one of the Dennis Dominators delivered in 1984. New in November 1984. Now it's hard to tell from this photograph, but this is actually in a rare version of the livery. When the stocks of Hull Azure paint had run out, they began to repaint the lower decks of some of the vehicles in the new shade of blue. And that is actually in the new shade of the blue. You can't really tell, partly because of how dark the photo is, but also because of the colour contrast. The contrast against the white and the yellow band there, in that proportion, makes it look a lot lighter, whereas the contrast with the broad swathe of white and then the darker blue at the top, the original Hull Azure at the top, it makes it look darker. But that is the new Cleveland Transit era blue. A handful of Dennis Dominators and a handful of these Scania double-deckers carried this variant of the livery, only very, very briefly. As soon as room came available in the paint shop, they were taken in and the repaint was finished, so they were put into the new livery. But they did run for a short period of time, some of them, with this lower deck in the new shade of blue and the upper deck still in the old. 108 had quite a varied career with KHCT. As we said, it was new in November 1984. When it was new, it was fitted with coach type seats. It was painted in Kingstonian coach livery, and it was one of the ones marketed as super decker. 108, 109, 110 were all done like that. It was transferred to York Pullman in September 1991. KHCT had bought York Pullman, and they owned it for a few years. It went to Kingstonian in April of 1992. It was returned to the main fleet in September of 1992, and then a month later, in October, it was reseated with bus seats, which, again, as you can see, as we saw in parts 1 and 2, they've come out of old Atlantean. You can see the curved back of them. So they're ex-Atlantean seats. It was renumbered to 208 in April 1997, and it was withdrawn in March 1999. So it was quite a good survivor of its batch. And it was sold to Houston Ram. It was another one to go to them. And it ended up with S and SA Bell of Brompton in North Yorkshire. And it was sold by them in October 2002, and it disappeared after that. 808 was new in December 1989. It worked for Stagecoach until April 1999. It was sold to Houston Ram, and it was another one that went up to Lanarkshire. And it finished its days up in Lanarkshire in southern Scotland with R&J Clark of Larkhall, where it was last recorded in July of 2011. So 108 days between runs on the 1B to Boothbury Estate via Hesel Road, and 808 has come in from Bransholme on the 27B, and they're both seen on the muck, the parking area behind Hull bus station. So on to 111 now, C111 CAT. This was one of the ones with coach type seats when it was new, delivered in Kingstonian coach livery and marketed as turbo deckers. They were among the first East Lancashire bodied Dennis Dominators that KHCT bought. It was new in February 1986. It was transferred to Kingstonian in August of 1990, but only kept it for 3 months. It went back to the main fleet in November of 1990. Then it went back to Kingstonian again 2 months later on, January 91. And straight onto York Pullman, and it returned to the main KHCT fleet in February of 1993. It was renumbered 211 in April 1997. It was withdrawn in April 1998, and it was kept in store until July of 1999, when it was sold on to Houston Ram. And it went up to County Durham. It was broken up for spares by an operator up there, and then the remains of it were scrapped at a scrapyard in Anfield Plain in County Durham in 2005. At some point in the early 90s, it was reseated with bus seats, as you can just about see through the window there. It appears it's either having its blind wound or it's on a short-lived variation of a service. The 41 was generally at Hull to Greatfield. It's showing Hesel, so it's probably in the middle of having its blind wound round. I don't remember the 41 projecting to Hesel. It may have done briefly as a competitive thing, but certainly KHCT ran to Hesel on the 181 as far as I remember, so it's probably just in the process of having its blind wound round to Greatfield when this photo was taken. Another one of the same batch, 113 C113 CAT. Another one of the ex-turbo deckers, 111, 112, 113 with those 3 buses, again new in February of 1986. And again, it was passed around Kingstonian and to the main fleet. This one didn't go to York, but it settled back in the main fleet by September of 1992. And again, it was renumbered in 1997 as 213. This was a bit of a pet in transit and stagecoach days. You can see it's quite a couple of extra badges on the front there. One of them's Gardner, as in the maker of the engine. See, it's also got a bit of extra black paint around the windscreens on the upper and lower deck. So it was kept as a bit of a pet. It was only one of the 3 to carry stagecoach livery as well. It was later painted into stagecoach colours, and it retained the extra badges and things. But unfortunately it was withdrawn in April of 1998 and sold on. It still apparently exists. It was sold for preservation in 2006, and it's shown as sewn on the DVLA website, so hopefully it's another of those KHCT buses that's in a barn somewhere waiting to be restored to its former glory. This is a photo from my collection, 136E136 SAT, one of the East Lancashire bodied Dennis Dominators with the bodywork that was a copy of the Alexander R-Type. This was known as the East Lancashire E-Type. This one was due in September of 1987. Became a bit of a celebrity in 1989 when it received the 1931 bus livery as part of the 90th anniversary of municipal transport in Hull celebrations. But by the time of this shot, which would have been around 1994, it had been painted back into normal bus livery, as you can see. Ring number 236 in 1997, withdrawn in March 1999, and it was broken up by an operator in Bristol in 2005. Just coming around Monument Bridge there on its way into town from Orchard Park on the 4. It's already got the blind set for the return working, but looking absolutely resplendent. Cleveland Transit, as we said before, did do a very good job of smartening the fleet up. As you can see, that looks absolutely stunning. Presumably freshly painted, but yeah, they were a lot smarter than they had been in the days of the bus war towards the end of council ownership. Another Dominator, this time at 149 F149 BKH, new in September of 1988. Parts on the muck between runs on the Outer Circle Service 23. You can see 107 part next to it, one of the ex-super deckers that was delivered with coach type seats. Again, it's been reseated to bus seats by the time of this shot. 149 was a late survivor with KHCT. It was renumbered 249 in April 1997, and it became 15049 in January 2003 as part of the Stagecoach national numbering scheme, and it wasn't withdrawn until August of 2005. It then transferred within Stagecoach to Bluebird buses of Aberdeen, and almost immediately went back down to Glasgow, and then it went back to Bluebird buses in Aberdeen in December 2005, and it finished up working for Waltons of Freckleton near Preston, and then being sold to a dealer in Preston in 2012. So it was a very late survivor of the type and the batch. One of the noticeable things about the days of Cleveland Transit ownership was an increase in the number of all-over advert buses. As we said, revenue had been in short supply towards the end of council days, so they needed to boost revenue up, and it was a very good way of earning extra income to do advertising. There'd always been advert buses in the KHCT fleet. Back in council days, 302 in Mariner Gas springs to mind, 519 advertising Kingstonian coach tours, 516 Hull telephones, all that kind of thing, 105 Viking radio. But yeah, more of them, they'd kind of reduced in numbers in the later council days, and they increased again during the Cleveland Transit ownership. So this is 154 F154 HAT, which was new in June 1989. Re number 254 in April 1997, withdrawn in April 1999. It was sold to Houston Ram, and it was used in their Coachmasters operating division, which they sold to First Manchester at the end of 2000, December 2000. So it became First Manchester 4823, and it was renumbered as part of the first renumbering scheme to 30263. It went to Eastern Counties at Norwich in 2004, and it was finally scrapped in December of 2004. So it had quite a varied career after it left KHCT. Here it is on the muck, the parking area behind the bus station, between runs on the 27 to Bransholme. As you can see, it was used to advertise KHCT's advertising business. So the lower deck panels were basically a normal fleet blue livery, and it just had this orange bit put in the middle. And it actually looks like the old Hull Azure at the top. It may not have been The front was painted in transit style livery. But yeah, it looked quite simple and quite smart. It was quite a distinctive member of the fleet. You seemed to see it quite often while it carried that livery. It carried it for a few years. So the last of the Dominators for this video, and also the last one numerically delivered to KHCT, 157 F157 HAT in the standard Cleveland Transit era livery. This batch were new with the 3 crowns motif on the seats. As we said in one of the earlier parts, although they had to get rid of that motif from the outside of the buses straight away because it was owned by the City Council, the Council realised that it was harder to get rid of it from the seats, so they gave them about 3 years to recover the seats. As you can just about see, this one's had its seats redone in a kind of red maquette. You can just see through the front window there. So it's already had its 3 crowns maquette replaced. It's on one of the competitive era services, the 61 from Beverley. It's just running from that to Hull bus station, and it's just going round to park on the muck between runs. The subsequent history of that bus was more or less the same as it was for 154. It was renumbered to 257 in 1997. It went to Houston Ram to be part of the Coachmasters fleet. It was sold to First Manchester, and it went to Eastern Counties. First Manchester 4826 and later 30266, and again scrapped in December 2004. So as well as painting native buses into new livery, Cleveland Transit did transfer some vehicles down from Cleveland to help out in Hull. There were some Atlanteans that came down. We'll see pictures of those later on. But also a number of Leland Leopards came. Now in the 70s, if you wanted a single deck bus, you were basically forced to buy a Leland National. And if you didn't want a Leland National, there were very few choices. Cleveland Transit, one of the operators, didn't want a National, so they chose to buy Leland Leopards that would normally be coach chassis. Indeed, some of them were delivered as coaches, but a lot of them were delivered with bus seats. Transit unusually specified the Plaxton Supreme body for most of theirs, not all of them, but most of them, which was normally a coach body, but a lot of the Cleveland ones, when they were new, came with the coach body but with bus seats inside, a version they called the Plaxton Supreme E. And this was one of them. As you can see, it's got bus seats. I believe it always had them from new. This one is 424 HPY 424V, which had been new to Cleveland in August of 1980. Quite a number of these worked in Hull. They didn't all work at the same time. A number would be transferred down. Some of them lasted a while, some didn't. They would go back up to the northeast, and different members of the batches would be sent down to replace them. So although quite a few worked in Hull, there were 8 altogether that worked in Hull. Not all of them worked at the same time. This one transferred down in January of 1994, and it lasted quite a long time for one of these. Some of them were a matter of weeks, but this one did 7 months. It was withdrawn from Hull in August of 1994 and sent back up to Stockton-on-Tees, where it joined the Cleveland Coaches fleet. So it would have had the blue bit at the bottom repainted orange for Cleveland Coaches. And it became fleet number 914. It was sold to Northern Bus of North Anston in 1995, the quite famous operator in the Sheffield area. And it passed on to Primrose of Leominster in 1997, and it was scrapped at Carlton in 2000. So it wasn't a bad innings for one of these buses. It managed 20 years altogether, but only 7 months of those in Hull, and it's just there between runs, about to leave the bus station. So on to the Metro buses now. This is 507 LAT 507V of the first batch. This one was new in April of 1980. It served until October of 1995, and it went on for further service. It was exported to Washington DC in 2006. It may well still be over there, so it ended up being quite far travelled. One of many of the Metro buses to be repainted into the Cleveland Transit era livery almost straight away. They still showed some of the battle scars from the Council era. This one's got a replacement grille. This isn't the original. It's a replacement, and by the look of it, an aftermarket type of a different style to the original. Then we've got 518 there. That's taken a little bit later on because it's got Stagecoach names on the Cleveland Transit livery. 518 new in February 1981, part of the second batch of Metro buses. SAG 518W. Withdrawn in March 1998. It went off to Ensign, the dealers of Purfleet in Essex, and then to London Pride Sightseeing. I believe they used it for spares. I don't think it entered service with London Pride, and it was scrapped in 1999. Sitting there in Hull bus station, having just run in on the 41 from Greatfield. Would have passed my late auntie's house on Newbridge Road on its way in. It's probably towards the end of its life. As you can see, it's got a nasty dint in the side of the in the panelling there, the side of the cab, which hasn't been repaired. The Stagecoach name suggests it was coming towards the end of its life when that was taken. It's slightly after the period of most of the shots in this one. Just next to it, incidentally, is the yellow cabin that sold newspapers, chocolate bars, etc. It was a famous feature of Hull bus station for many years, and people would often meet near there. If you were meeting somebody in the bus station, you ask them to meet you near the yellow cabin. So yeah, very nice to see there. 519 now, SAG 519W, another one delivered in February of 1981. This for many years carried an overall advertising livery for Kingstonian coaches, but in the transit area it was put back into normal fleet livery, as you can see here. Got one of the X-registered Atlanteans behind it there, having just run in the old livery. They were never painted into the new colours. They were all sold to Ensign shortly after transit took over. They still had some book value, and it was decided to try and raise some money by selling them on. You see an East Yorkshire Bristol VR just next to it there as well. And then we've got 522 SAG 522W. This one was delivered in March 1981. It was renumbered 922 in September 1997. During 1997, Stagecoach renumbered the Cleveland Transit KHCT and Stagecoach Darlington fleets and the Hartlepool fleet into a common series. So where there was a conflict, where there were two numbers the same, they renumbered one of the vehicles, and this one finished up being 922 in September 1997. And it was withdrawn in March 1998. As you can see, it's another one that's got an aftermarket grille, in this case picked out in a rather nice silver, a different design to the other one we saw. But yeah, looking very good. Just between runs on the muck there, on the 3 to Orchard Park. So a couple of the Arvico minibuses now. As we said in the last two parts, these were delivered in a maroon livery with Royale branding, and they were named after various kings and queens. The two in this shot are 605 and 614, both new in January of 1987. 605 was originally named King John, and 614 was named King George V. They were both withdrawn in 1996, 605 in July, 614 in August. But as you can see, Cleveland Transit painted them into the normal bus livery, the single-deck version of the bus livery, as opposed to continuing the Royale branding. And very smartly looked as well, I have to admit. I did like the Royale branding, the maroon livery and the branding, but they did look very smart in the transit era livery as well, as you can see there. Another one of the same batch, 613 D613 MKH, again new in January of 1987. This one was originally named Queen Victoria, and it was withdrawn in August of 1996. All three of the Arvicos that we've seen had an interesting subsequent career. 605 ended up, it went for a few owners in County Durham before being exported to Ireland. It finished up in County Donegal in Ireland, where it was last recorded in about 2011. 613 went through various owners in Devon and Shropshire, and it was sold to become a traveller's caravan by May of 2001. It was converted to a traveller's caravan, so it may still be around somewhere in the corner of a field, who knows. And then 614 stayed on the mainland of the UK as well. It went down to Wales, had various owners in Wales. It was quite a late survivor. It was scrapped in December 2005. Now, one of the features of buses in the early to mid-90s was the small ads bus. Basically an advert that was overseen by another body, in this case the RNLI, the lifeboats. East Yorkshire had one that was done for Dove House Hospice and also another one for Hull City Football Club. So basically the main beneficiary of it, if you like, would have the main part of the livery. As you can see, this one's done in the lifeboat colours. But onto that livery, onto the base livery, will be stuck various small advertisements for companies that in some way supported or contributed towards whichever organisation was actually being advertised on the bus. So these were supporters of the lifeboat association. As you can see, the result wasn't particularly great. I mean, the adverts are very small. The bus would obviously be stood still for a long period of time for you to be able to read them all. And it did look quite cluttered, and it was quite an assault on the eyes. This is 803G, 803LAG, one of the Scanias. This one was new in September of 1989 and withdrawn in April 1999. It was another one that finished up through the Coachmasters and First Manchester. And it finished up with First Leeds as fleet number 30251, and it was scrapped in July of 2006. Jeff Jones photographed it in Cleveland Transit days. You can see the front of it still in the Cleveland Transit livery. And he took photos of all sides of it basically. So there's the off side, looking quite cluttered as you can see. There's the near side and the rear. Again, you need quite a substantial period of time to be able to read all the adverts between the decks there. And probably decent eyesight as well, to be honest. And then just finally the rear and the off side again. These buses have been rebuilt slightly. They had some bodywork problems when they were new. When they were new, the registration plate was actually behind glass. It was in a recessed panel that was glassed over, but that tended to let water into the sort of structure at the back. So they took the glass out and just panelled it over in metal and put the registration plate directly onto the metal there. So this one's been rebuilt, as have most of them by this point in time. So we're just wandering into early Stagecoach days now. When Stagecoach first took over, they kept the KHCT name. In Cleveland Transit days, it had said an employee-owned company underneath on that strapline, and that was changed when Stagecoach took over to a Stagecoach company or a Stagecoach group company. And they wasted no time in bringing in some new vehicles. They brought in some Volvo B&M single-deckers, and they also brought in 3 Volvo Olympian double-deckers, of which this was the first one. This is 817 817 KRH. There was also 818 and 819. So this was new in June 1995. And it stayed with Stagecoach. As far as I'm aware, all its working life, it became 16817 in the national fleet numbering scheme. It was transferred to Lincolnshire Roadcar at Lincoln in 2009. And I believe it served with them until it was finally withdrawn. But as you can see, when Stagecoach bought out Cleveland Transit and the employees, they were part of the conditions of the sale was that they kept the blue livery for 2 years afterwards. So the new buses they got delivered for the first couple of years carried the blue, white and yellow livery. And initially they carried, as I say, the KHCT name. They eventually started to use the name Stagecoach Kingston upon Hull in the normal Stagecoach style, but certainly initially they kept the KHCT name that you can see there. So back to March 1994, this is one of the 4 Atlanteans brought down from Cleveland Transit to operate in Hull. This one is 946 SDC 146H. They're interesting buses. They've been rebodied in the early to mid 80s. So this one was originally new in June of 1970 to Teesside Municipal Transport, who were the forerunners of Cleveland Transit. Cleveland Transit were formed in 1974. This particular bus was rebodied in January of 1985 with the more modern style. It had an older style Northern Counties body when it was new, and they were rebodied with this more modern style of Northern Counties bodywork, as I say in this case, in January of 1985. It was transferred down to Hull in February of 1994. It did 7 months. It was withdrawn from Hull in September 1994. Eventually this one was exported to Munich. It worked for City Sightseeing in Munich. It was last recorded there in May of 2004. Again, it may still be around somewhere, I don't know. Just note quickly, this one's got the sort of modern style of hopper that goes straight across the window. The whole top part of the window would pull in. And the reason I mention that is this is 947 SDC 147H, which, as you can see, has got an earlier type of hopper window. That's because this one was rebodied in June of 1983, so it received a slightly earlier version of the body. Again, it had been new in June 1970 with a different style of Northern Counties body, an older style, to Teesside Municipal Transport. It passed the Cleveland Transit when they were formed, and it was rebodied, as we said, in 1983. Again, transferred to KHCT in February 1994, and it did a month longer. It was withdrawn from KHCT. In fact, no, it did a month less. Sorry, I can't add up. August 1994 it was withdrawn from KHCT, so it did 6 months in Hull, and it was sold on to Ensign Bus in November of 1994. And this one ended up in Canada, in Victoria, British Columbia, where it was last recorded in 2011, so again it may still be out there somewhere. So there were 4 of these, as well as 946 and 947 that we've seen. There was 941 and 942 that were transferred to Hull, SDC 141 and 142H. There were 12 of these buses that were rebodied. The other 8 of them worked for East Yorkshire. They were bought by them in about 1990, 1991. So at one point all of them finished up working in Hull, albeit for 2 different companies. They weren't particularly popular in Hull as far as I know, although the bodywork was new. The chassis was very old, as I said, new in 1970. The chassis had been refurbished before they were rebodied. That's partly why they were rebodied over such a long period, because Cleveland Transit refurbished the chassis themselves before they sent them off for rebodying. But they were still not the best vehicles to drive, as far as I'm aware. They still kind of showed their age to the drivers, and they weren't particularly popular, which is probably why they didn't serve in Hull for very long. And then just finally the exception that proves the rule. As we said, when Stagecoach bought Cleveland Transit and the employee share of KHCT, they were asked to use the livery for 2 years. However, they didn't have to use it on new service. It was only on the existing operation, so if they introduced a new service they could use their own livery if they wanted to. And they introduced some express services. There was the X62 to Leeds, which was joint with East Yorkshire. There was also the 909, which ran to Barnaby Top and then either to Grimsby or along to Scunthorpe, Doncaster, Meadowhall and Sheffield. And the way it ran, the buses connected with each other, so you could travel from Hull to Grimsby and Hull to Sheffield each hour, or each half hour should I say. Sometimes you'd go through on the same vehicle, other times you'd change over at Barnaby Top. But because they were new services, they weren't covered by the requirement to use the blue livery. So they were marketed under the Stagecoach Express branding, with buses in normal Stagecoach livery. Some new buses were bought for it. This one is one that was transferred in. This is 73 K573 DFS. It was a Volvo B10M with Plaxton Premier interurban bodywork, and it was new to Fife Scottish, who were another Stagecoach subsidiary, in March 1993 as their number 573. It was new in the Stagecoach Express livery that you see it there. Transferred to Hull in June 1995. Almost immediately went on to Grimsby, and it came back to Hull again in October 1995. And it must have developed a liking for Hull, because it stayed there for quite some time. It was renumbered under the Stagecoach National Fleet Numbering System as 52143 in January 2003. But it was still working in Hull at that time. It was eventually transferred away to East Midland at Chesterfield in October of 2003. And then it went to Oxford, Grimsby and Lincoln. Back up to Cleveland Transit at Stockton. And then in October of 2007 it came back to Hull. When it went to Cleveland Transit, which it did in June 2007, it was converted to a driver trainer, and it came down to Hull in October 1997 as a driver training vehicle, re-registered DAZ 5455. It was still working in Hull in 2009, and as far as I know it ended its days in Hull, so it must have developed a liking for the place. But it's there on the muck behind Hull Bus Station, just between runs on the 909. Just to finish, I'll show you this photograph that I used in part 1, just to show you one of the Scania single-deckers in the Cleveland Transit era livery. This is obviously in Stagecoach days, because the buses are carrying Stagecoach fleet names. But this is 703 F703 BAT, just showing those buses in that livery. Just next to it you've got 112 there, C112 CAT, the one we haven't seen in this video. And on the other side there, vehicle we saw earlier on, F149 BAT, by this time 249. Sorry, F149 BKH should I say. Former 149, by this time 249 in the Stagecoach fleet. So just to finish off, I've not managed to shoehorn a picture of a Metropolitan into this one because Cleveland Transit area, I'll be pushing it a bit. There will be some in part 4. Part 4 will be coming about a month from now. I'm doing this video in October 2023. So sometime in November, part 4 will be out and about. And that will look at some more of the Jeff Jones photographs that I've acquired with the copyright. But they will focus on the council era days. And there will be some Metropolitans in that one. Hence why I've not felt the need to shoehorn one into this video. Just to finish, we normally finish with a bit of ephemera of some sort, and we've got one of the Stagecoach Express tickets from 1995 from the 909 route. You see service 909 down there. It doesn't say where I was going, it said I got on at Hull bus station. The return fare was £4.50. I suspect I was either going to Doncaster or Sheffield, but it didn't actually say that on the ticket, as you can see. So yeah, that's it for this one. As always, thank you for joining me. If you haven't already watched parts 1 and 2 of this series on KHCT, then please give those a look on my channel. As I said, the first one looked at photographs that I'd taken ranging from the 80s through to about 2003, and the second one looked at the late council era in about 1993, mainly with Jeff Jones images, as we've seen in this one as well. And part 4 will look at the council era of the 80s and the early 90s. But yeah, thank you for watching. Please take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.